I become this person who now recognize that forgiveness is the key to everything. So this is one of the elements that I recognized I needed to do in order to become this whole person of gathering myself. You know, when you've been supplemented or compartmentalized in different parts of your life, here you are now wondering, can I ever be whole? You know, can I ever mean something to somebody? Can I ever be special to someone? And you can never be any of those things to someone else if you're not those things to yourself.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Rush with the Rush Outrospective, a Mastering the Art of Living podcast. Monica Johnson's journey is a vivid portrait of resilience and rebirth. Tragically, orphaned at a young age and shuffled between homes where neglect and abuse were all too common, Monica endured more than her fair share of life's harsh realities. She faced a series of life-threatening accidents that would have broken many, from tumbling 18 feet off a bridge to surviving a horrific vehicular accident in her childhood. Yet, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, Monica emerged with an unshakable awareness of her intrinsic value and a relentless drive to uplift others. In her professional life, Monica has become a torchbearer for reclaiming the essence of self-worth. Through her groundbreaking initiatives, That Girl is Smart and That Boy is Smart, she fills a critical gap, empowering young girls and boys battling with their self-esteem and identity. Monica's initiatives do more than just teach. They inspire strength, motivate ambition, and cultivate resilience and recognize talents in spaces where these qualities are often overshadowed by adversity. Her life and her work are profound reminders that from brokenness can emerge breathtaking wholeness, and that every individual has the potential to rise, reclaim, and renew their lives. Monica, it's a pleasure to have you on the Rush Outrospective, a Mastering the Art of Living podcast. Wow, here we are.
Yes, here we are. Thank you, Rush. Yeah. What an amazing way to introduce myself. I'm so at awe with it myself.
Yeah, you know, it's so awesome. That's so important. I get it right, you know, because I want to make sure we put that light on Monica Johnson that I know, and you know, I can still remember the day, and we're going back and looking at some old footage of your presentation with, we met at Fellowship Power Lunch, the monthly motivational, third Tuesday of every month, monthly motivational speaking engagement throughout that's handled in Frisco area. And I remember I went back and looked at some of that stuff, and I remember the emotion that I had, as I was listening to you. You know, it was like you were telling part of my story as you were speaking, and I said, I want to get to know this woman at some point in some place in my life, and because I know she has some valuable things to share in my life, to be a part of, sharing my life and to be a part of my life, and I feel very blessed and fortunate to have you here today and to call you a friend as well.
Likewise, I'm honored.
Awesome. You know, as I was saying, as we look into unclaimed property, it's time to reclaim yourselves. I wanted to ask you a few of the questions about that mindset, unclaimed property, it's time to claim yourself. What was there a personal experience that led you to foster this mindset and idea of working towards reclaiming yourself?
You know, I would say yes, it actually was. I remember, you know, like just being a child, not knowing my mother or my biological mother or my biological father, and wondering like, whose identity do I have? And so when I was in corporate, I had worked for a Fortune 50 company, and I was part of this process called the sheet mist, which every state has this, what they call abandoned property. And abandoned property is where you, like, if there is a receivable that is not cashed, or it could be tangible or intangible, that it has a value to it that is not taken ownership of, it is then, based on the laws of every state and their exemptions, it is sent back to the state. And the state takes ownership of that. And I just thought about my life and how, you know, I remember when they were saying how CPS had come looking for my sister and I. So that would mean that at one point in time, the state could have had ownership of my sister and I. And I did not want to be considered unclaimed property. But yet and still, going through that journey of identifying the reason I was in the places that I was in, it allowed me to recognize that I had really been abandoned. And what that means, not maybe physically from people's perspective, but when a child is not raised with their mother, biological mother, biological father, there are some intricate things that a child needs and that a child goes and miss and that a child doesn't learn. They only learn what is in the environments that they're in. And because I endured a lot of trauma, I was having to reclaim me. And I remember it took years, and it's still taking years to reclaim me. So it was a concept to where when I was in corporate, I did not want to send the monies to the state that did not rightfully belong to the state. I wanted everybody to have their ownership or the owner to reclaim it. And I feel the same way about young girls and young boys and veterans and the homeless and mental illness and all of that when it comes to reclaiming yourself. So I feel like if we could learn how not to abandon ourselves, then ultimately we can have others reclaim themselves.
That's amazing. You've taken this thought process of something you were doing, for the bank, and it tapped into something inside of you to realize that, hey, this was part of my journey, and that's a unique perspective to think about children that are abandoned and the state takes over and then they go through a system that's very treacherous sometimes.
You're right, and if I can add just a little bit more to that, even in the state now, and to where we live in the state of Texas, CPS no longer has conservatorship of our children who are in foster care. And so what that means is that now it is housed out to another organization that has become the conservator of our children who belong in the state of Texas. And that to me is where I know I'm supposed to be helping these young kids, boys and girls, reclaim themselves, because the system is broken. And there are children after children who age out of foster care, not recognizing that they can take Simone Biles, for example. And if you know her story, now she is this great Olympian who was once in foster care.
Oh, wow.
Who has now become the most decorated Olympian there is in the world in all time, based on her backstory of having to reclaim herself and going back and saying, I'm going to be an advocate for Simone. And so I myself now had to be an advocate for Monica. And I believe now my other assignment is to be an advocate for these young kids who are in the system.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that about Simone Biles. Wow,
Yes.
To see her flourish the way she is, it's amazing. Do you think that there's when it comes to, there's a couple questions with that, like in adoption, right? Let's talk about adoption and then this difference between the two, right? I don't know if there's a difference between adoption or somebody who's taking in foster kid that wants to adopt.
There's a difference, yes.
There is a difference. What is that difference?
So the difference is that there are children who are in placement, which means that they're temporarily placed in a home or an agency or an organization just for shelter and for the natural basic tenets of life, right? Which is clothing, shelter, water, food, so forth and so on. And then on the other side, there is an opportunity for someone to give them a forever home, which then leads to adoption. Well, I never received a forever home, but I was placed in a forever home, but not through the system. I was placed, my last home was in the 7th grade. I was in East Texas. And so having to navigate, and that would be my 4th home that I had lived in at that time. And I think in each one of those environments, you learn what it is that goes on in every environment, and you decide, even as a child, am I placed here or am I going to be in my forever home here? And sometimes just based upon the environment, children sometimes are caught up in the system of what society does, and they never really, a lot of times, get a forever home, which is a adoption. They age out of the system, which means they have come to the legal age to where they are now considered an adult and they can live on their own, yet never being fully adopted by anyone.
Wow, that's insane. Yeah, I know a friend of mine, I saw him at the gym the other day, and he said, we've been trying to adopt, they've brought children to his house and they've stayed there, but they've never had been able to adopt or.
So there was a placement, so they were placed in their home, they became foster, what they call foster parents.
Yeah.
And foster parents are that you do the necessary, tenets again of caring for a child, boy or girl, in your home, 1 or 2, and a lot of times it's really good if you can keep siblings together.
Yeah.
I remember my first case when I had foster kids as a CASA advocate, and a CASA advocate is a court-appointed special advocate who is nothing but the voice for the children inside the courtroom.
Wow.
And so that's where you're sworn in by the judge. And so I remember having that ownership of that and just seeing how kids had the opportunity to go back to their parents. And you can see them, and sometimes the parents just need tools and resources on learning how to parent, or maybe to get over these obstacles that they're in, because people do have difficult things in their lives. But there are sometimes, like my case, who was not raised by my mother or father.
Yeah. You have an organization, two organizations called That Girl is Smart and That Boy is Smart. How has your journey of reclaiming parts of yourself influenced your work?
Oh, it has influenced it so much. You know, my husband does the boys. I believe that a woman can never teach a young man how to be a man. We can only teach them how to how women should be treated. And it's vice versa in that manner. And so my husband would do the boys, and then I would do the girls. And this all goes behind my backstory of me not knowing my mom. I never saw a picture of my mom until I was 30 years old. She was killed when she just turned 21 on her 21st birthday, and I was 1. And so no one gave me a voice. You know, they gave me what they thought society would say that this child is going to turn out to be. You know, when you have so many stigmas against you, because, you know, I was, again, raised in 4 different homes. I have like 26 brothers and sisters, just based upon all the identities of the homes that I was in. And if we would go back 2 years from now, I was Ancestry.com now just matched me finally with a father in the DNA, which means that all the stuff that I had heard about previous, or walked through, or learned, or did the hard work of getting to know me by reclaiming me, I'm now in that process again of having to gather all of my pieces again back to this one space. And so having this organization That Girl and That Boy is Smart, and SMART is an acronym. Yeah. It is successful, magnificent, authentic, resourceful, and talented. And it's that every child has that opportunity to be that. No one has to tell them. They just need someone to cultivate it and to nurture the gifts and the talents that's within them, but allow them to be themselves. And I think that if I could help a young girl, and my husband can help a young boy to overcome the obstacles through mentoring, through community, leadership, fitness, and mental and physical health, wellness, then maybe we can change the tenets of the world where they can see through different eyes, just like I did.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So is it SMART? What is it?
It's SMART, successful, magnificent, authentic, resourceful, and talented.
I was wow, that's amazing, and that's such a you know, that acronym is like, you know, it brings it like hoists you up, you know, it just hoists you up on high. You're lifting that children on high to a higher level elevation of being and thinking, you know, when you have that mindset already.
Absolutely, and I think it all goes behind my smile.
Yeah.
So I decided to shift in my mind what I wanted to manifest in my life. I can only influence myself so that I can lift others, and then we both can go out and execute through a smile.
I should have brought a pen with me to write it on my hand.
So I'm a smiling, smart girl.
Now I know why some of these journalists like take notes, because there's always something impactful when you're talking to when we're talking to individuals that are making significant contributions like you are. Emotional challenges. What are some emotional challenges that you faced during this journey of self-discovery, and how did you overcome them?
Oh, it is so many. I would say, first of all, the first one would be rejection. You know, when you don't know who you are, and you don't know what it's like to be hugged and loved, and to be put in that space where I think every child should be able to have someone claim them, to be able to have their birthday. My first birthday party, I was 35 years old. Wow. Celebrating, you know, and this is my husband who did it for me. But just recognizing that through the depression, through the abandonment, through the rejection, I became a people pleaser. I wanted to be in everybody's life because I wanted everybody to kind of know that I was somebody special. I wasn't what society says, that I had so many stigmas against me, I wasn't going to amount to anything. And so having to navigate those spaces, not just in my personal life, but even in my professional life. And then being diagnosed as an adult with ADHD, having to recognize how ADHD is 76% genetic, which means one of my parents gave it to me, but I have never had an opportunity to talk to them about it. But I'm being held accountable for something that my parents gave me and the world sees as a negative. and yet I didn't even know I even had it at that time.
Some say that love is an act of being, right?
It is.
All right, and so, what and then of becoming, right?
Yep.
How would you describe who you've become?
I become this person who now recognize that forgiveness is the key to everything. So this is one of the elements that I recognized I needed to do in order to become this whole person of gathering myself. You know, when you've been supplemented or compartmentalized in different parts of your life, here you are now wondering, can I ever be whole? You know, can I ever mean something to somebody? Can I ever be special to someone? And you can never be any of those things to someone else if you're not those things to yourself. And so I knew that just based on our ethnicity, we did not believe in counseling. And so there would be no way that if I did not have the forgiveness, which means I needed to forgive the lady who killed my mother, which was my sister's mother. So I ended up going to their home to stay with them for a while because I wanted to know my sister. So that was the beginning of it. Did I know at that age what I really was doing? I did not know it at that age, but I knew I was a change agent. What I also knew too, though, was that I needed to get some professional help. I couldn't just pray about that. You have to have more. I believe you need counseling and you also need theology. And so with me now breaking that barrier, breaking those curses of saying we don't get counseling, getting myself to see someone that was a mental professional who could care less anything happened to me, didn't know anything about my story, but who could give me some tools and some resources and some elements that I could use to be able to see myself in a different light and to recognize that the sexual abuse, the mental abuse, the psychological abuse that I endured as a child was not my fault. And that I could then become this person now who could see that person or see the people who had hurt me and be able to say, I forgive them, and be able to walk in this space knowing that I don't hold that against you any longer. I know it was for the greater good of it. It was good that I was afflicted, but it was good that I was afflicted so I could recognize that I have a huge assignment here on earth that I needed to be able to be whole in order to achieve that. And so when you're gathering all those pieces and you're recognizing that, oh, I am this smart girl. You know, I tell people a lot of times I have a lot of degrees, and people sometimes want to make a big deal about it or in a negative way. But what I recognize, though, Rush, is that God just credentialed my experiences. In other words, he was taking every excuse from man and giving me everything that I needed. So when someone says, well, you don't have this, oh, yes, I do. I have that. No, well, you haven't experienced this. Oh, yeah, I've experienced this. Because I believe you can't teach anything you haven't experienced. And if you hadn't experienced it, and if you haven't healed it, you definitely cannot teach anyone anything. And so it's allowed me to recognize that, how can I help someone reclaim themselves if I hadn't reclaimed my own self?
Wow. How many degrees do you have?
5.
No. Yeah. He's credentialed. He credentialed you and he said, and here's some more. And you're gonna be the super advocate, the super advocate for children and adults too, that people can use as a resource and give you that long-lasting strength, and not only your experience but the wisdom and intelligence to
Absolutely.
use as a tool.
And I also believe that nothing just happens by happenstance. I think we go through life for the simple fact of whatever our predestined assignment was. I'm really just walking into my predestined assignment. You know, I thought that anything I've done before now, I thought I had already achieved enough. But I'm just touching the surface of the assignment that he's given to me. And you know, when you're walking in and you can see it so clearly now, you can't understand the whole thing. And just think if we did, though, we probably wouldn't have these conversations. We'd be too afraid to even talk about it.
Yeah.
But just recognizing that I've been trusted with trauma, because I'm going to ask questions of this trauma. And me and that trauma is going to have some conversations, and we're going to walk through it, and we're going to heal it, so I can go out and help others people heal theirs.
Let's go. I like it. Yeah, that's awesome. That is so great. You know, I was going to say, like, you know, in many ways, you're kind of, like you said, you only touch the surface the surface, right? Does that mean, like, do you feel like you're living your life backwards, like what you should have learned when you were a child, and now that you're an adult, and you're still like, you got that youthful vigor of like wanting more inside you so you can continue to grow and mature? Do you feel like that?
I
sometimes?
do. You know, I was having this conversation in these last 2 weeks with, you know, having a dialogue with Monica. You know, and a lot of times little Monica shows up, and you know, when you're feeling some fear or some uncertainty, it's always a trigger. And what I recognize though is that sometimes I can't handle my own triggers, so I know I can't handle anyone else's. And so what I'm recognizing is that that little girl in me is going back, and she's saying, okay, let's pause here. Let's watch it from a different perspective now and see what it looks like. Because if you can see it now at this 50 year or something of age, than that 10-year-old little girl, what would you have said to her then? Because there's another little girl who's walking right now in the space that you were in. And imagine her being traumatized even more so just based on the environment and the life that we live right now. So I do see that. I do see that it was a blessing. It was a blessing to not know my mother, because I don't think I would have been that inquisitive about life. Because I'm now having to go back and say, oh, that is the reason that took place. I'll give you one example. And it was when last year, when I couldn't figure out what was the reason I was not able to go to school that first week or so when I moved to my last home. It was because nobody had legal guardianship of me. Here I am as a 50-some-year-old woman, recognized I've legally not been adopted. I've legally didn't have a guardianship, and the reason I was able to go to school is because my mother at that time, she worked for the independent school district. She drove the bus for them, and that's how I got into school.
Wow.
So I really belong to God.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Like I think some of these children, like Simone Biles, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I was thinking when you were saying that. That's a child of God. That's a child of Christ. Like that's amazing. Like
It's him.
yeah, dealing with dealing with resistance. How do you deal with the resistance or fear that may arise during your process of self-recovery?
Oh my gosh, you know, I say this, I have a lot of energy. And sometimes you have to reflect on the fact of you being rejected, you being misunderstood. So if you know some of the tenets of what happens to children or adults who have attention deficit disorder, their attention span is you got to keep them focused, need a routine, got to have some resources and tools in place just so you'll be able to survive this environment. And I recognize that a lot of time I would hear, oh, you just got too much energy for me. You just drain me when I'm around you. And it got to the point to where I'll be like, but just imagine, if it's doing that to you, then what is it doing to me? So having to fight these spaces that really not want me in them, but yet recognizing that I was placed in it for a reason, and no one gets a chance to tell me that I don't belong any longer. And so I don't need to be in a group now to where if I get to a space to where I have something good I want to share, and if I can't share it with you, that means it's not a safe place. And it's time for me to do something different. That means that sometimes friendships that have been in your place for some while may not be those same friendships. Our family may not be seen the same way. So I'm no longer protecting myself because I'm afraid or I have fear of being abandoned. I'm recognizing that I have a gift, that I've been chosen for this moment. And being chosen will leave you in a place of loneliness sometimes. Not abandonment, there's a difference. Yeah. It's alone in this space so that when you do have the opportunity to navigate these waters like God has called you to be the hands and the feet of Him, they'll know that it was God sent and not Monica sent.
That's crazy. That's amazing. Also see it like, do you see it like maybe they're afraid of what you might, what you might see, might say or see, and
yes.
And they're afraid of your honest, and because maybe they know where you come from is a deep well of emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and more.
Think about it. If here I am having to deal with it in my 40s about navigating adult relationships, what are children going through now?
Yeah.
And then if you put on top of that your personal environment, your work environment, which is your professional environment, then your church environment, if you're in church or whatever, however your spiritual walk is, you know, a lot of that leaves you in a place of manipulation. It can leave you in a place of just really being more traumatized. It's what we call spiritual, I call it spiritual rape. You can be raped in any relationship. Doesn't mean you have to physically do it to you. They can emotionally and spiritually do it, take advantage of you in your circumstances. And so making sure that you see the guard, you see who he is in you, you watch and you navigate these spaces with this clear, my strap is still falling, I'm sorry about that. Navigate these spaces in the clear water of just walking, without questioning.
Yeah.
That means you got to trust. And it's hard to trust when you don't see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one time one of my friends said, like you said, the hands and feet, which is ironically, because he said, you can nail your own feet down, you can actually nail your left hand down. But when someone comes up to you and you want to hand them the hammer, will you hand it to them? Will you hand it to them and let them nail your, or will you scream, fight, and kick with that one? Not letting other people hold you accountable to a certain.
And think about it. How many times are we held accountable for someone else's trauma that you put on me without my permission?
Yeah. Wow, that's a deep. Well, that's a scary thought. I don't want to talk about. Cut. No, I'm just kidding.
Then reclaim yourself in all of that, and that's what we do from generation to generation.
Yeah.
I recognize that my grandmother didn't raise my mother, my mother didn't raise me, and I was in that process of this part of reclaiming me, not to raise my daughter.
Yeah.
So that generational cycle of mothers and daughters relationships still being abandoned would have been carried on and going on and on until we paused and said, look, something's wrong here.
Yeah. Wow. I was going to ask you this question. It might have been answered already. Is that the impact on relationships? How does reclaiming unclaimed parts of oneself affect relationships with others?
A lot. It does. Through your marriage. So I walked into a marriage. I was 35 years old when I got married. My husband, who I love dearly, and I recognize he's not as hyperactive as I am, but he is more reserved. And I know that that's what God had placed he and I together for. And I remember when I first met him, he was like, you're going to be speaking all over the world. And I'm like, what does he know? I'm not going to be talking to anybody. Because until I met him, I was only just really working in my professional world. I was not speaking. Now, I was training in development, but I was not speaking in the capacity of preaching God's word, counseling people, helping, and just really calling it out, or just speaking just with clear boldness. But it created a barrier because I've been this independent woman. And I had given everybody an opportunity to help me in my younger years. Matter of fact, I got grounded at 26. Living in Dallas, paying my own bills and still getting grounded. So people still had control.
Yeah.
Because I felt like, because at that time when you're in that space of wanting to be included, it creates such a boundary that is so crossed over and people can take advantage of it. Yeah. And so until it made me realize that I did what everybody said. I became what everybody wanted me to become. I became this chameleon, or I would code switch. I would speak the way you wanted me to speak, or I would talk the way you wanted, or act or behave, only so that I can be included in your environment. But oh, Rush, but the moment I learned how to get myself together, that's when it started happening, when I saw the resistance, because then I was no longer going to allow, whether it was family, whether it was friends, whether it was corporate, because how can I intimidate you, someone who doesn't know their parents, someone who was raised in 4 different homes, who fell 18 feet off of a bridge, ran over by a car, brain surgery, 8 screws, all of these physical things happening. Then on top of the sexual and the psychological and emotional abuse, how do I intimidate you? And you think that your life has been glorious from what I could see, and you're thinking you're afraid of me? But relationships create that. Yeah. You have it to where people, just by the nature of who you are and what they see that God has done for you, that it gives them this natural envy. But you're walking in it not knowing that it's envy. You're really trying to navigate the walls and bring them down just so you can be included. Yeah. And so here you are now, being in places where you had no business being. I can tell you before I got married, there was one relationship. I was my 20s, at North Texas, getting my degree in accounting. Now, you know, accounting takes a lot of concentration and analytical skills and all this. Had no business being at this guy's apartment 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the police is being called on me, you know, because he would not let me in his apartment. He had another girl over there. And I remember the officer that day. So you talking about how it affect you in relationships? I had no self-esteem. He said, "What are you doing here?" And he was a Caucasian officer. He said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "You're a nice looking young lady. It seems like you have a lot going on for yourself. If anybody has to call the police on your livelihood, you don't need to have any relationship with them at all." And that was the day I decided that I was going to regain myself. I was not going to date any longer. That the next time I did date with somebody, it was going to be my husband.
Wow.
And it ended up being that way, being my husband. I took myself out of that environment because I was so tired of being used, abused, broken, mistreated, never called and checked on. It was a lot of things. So whether it's family, whether it's friend, whether it's corporate, wherever it is, relationships were broken because I was broken. And it took me looking at even being a mother. It was hard for me to be a mother because I never recaptured the little girl as a daughter.
Wow. I can relate to that in some ways. You know that. Breaking patterns. How did you, as a young adult, break negative patterns that stem from the neglect aspects?
You tell me I can't do it? Oh, you just gave me a new ticket. I'm going to do it to the detriment of me. If it's going to kill me, I'm going to do it, right? Because that means you don't know anything about me. Because the one thing that you do know is that I'm unstoppable. I'm going to persevere. I'm going to have the resistance and the resilience to press through. But now I recognize I don't have to prove anything to anybody. So me breaking barriers, the first degree I got, the accounting degree, it wasn't for me. For 5 years, it was up under my mattress. I was sitting in grad school, getting my master's in getting my MBA at the University of Dallas. And Dr. Whittington, he said, first day of school, I never met him. He said, "Who told you you weren't going to be anything? Who told you you weren't going to amount to anything?" He said, "You're just achieving stuff to be achieving stuff." And I was looking around like, who is he talking to? You know, how does he know my story? This is the first day of class. He doesn't know anything about me. But it was a defining moment for me to recognize that, oh, I was. He said, because if you don't stop, you're going to have a nervous breakdown. And I was on my way to have a nervous breakdown because I was working full time. I had my daughter living with me at that time. I was a single mom. We were living in a 1-bedroom apartment, had a paper route. I was doing all of these things, and then in grad school, proving to my corporate job at that time, that who said I needed a master's degree to get promoted to become a manager. I needed to prove them wrong. What did I do to the detriment of myself? But I broke all those barriers. I remember sitting down with my daughter and telling her, "Look, we will be lightless before I sell my body for a light bill." I saw it growing up, and I was not going to see it here. I was not going to pass those things on. So we're going to break that boundary. The fact that my mother didn't raise me and my grandmother didn't raise her, we're going to break that generational curse too. You're going to be right here with me. And when you walk out of this house, you'll be 18 and older, and you're going to decide on how to do that. So we're going to break the fact of not having the education that we needed to be able to do things. You don't have to necessarily have as many as I have, but we're going to show that nobody can stop you from doing anything. I'm going to work for a corporation. I'm going to work and I'm going to become an entrepreneur. I'm going to write books. All of those things because people told me I was not going to amount to anything. But what they didn't recognize is that they never asked me what I wanted to be. And God had already preordained me to break barriers, to break generational curses, so that when you saw me, unless I told you, you was not going to see the residue of what my resume did look like.
Wow, that's awesome. That's why I like you so much, because that's why I like you so much, because your story, in ways, you know, the like you said, if you tell me not, to, you know, I'm going to do it. Let's see here. Community influence. What role does community and social societal influence play in the process of reclaiming unclaimed parts of our life?
You know, it does. Let's go back to this facet of the corporate job that I had, which is called unclaimed property. But I was the escheatment manager. So the proper word for it is called escheatment. and it is abandoned property that people don't claim. Do you not know it's over 60-some billion dollars that are on general ledgers right now that people have not claimed?
Wow.
Do you know why the society, why the government doesn't want them to reclaim it? Because they use that money to fund their cities, their organizations, their communities and everything. Because it's money that they're getting interest off of. But it's money that doesn't belong to them. And so in society, I wanted to become part of society and community because we all need community. And if we don't have community, then how do we know what our part in that society that we're placed in? And so I wanted to be, but I'm not good about politics though. That's the difference in it. But now I have come to the fact of knowing that without community, you have nothing. Because you can't be a part of a community if you're not in the community. If you don't know your neighbors. And I remember during the pandemic, I had lived across the street from one of my neighbors for 9 years, and I'd never met her. Wow. Because the object of me moving to where I moved to in this city that we live in was not to talk to anybody else. Because where I moved from, we had a front entry garage, and now I wanted a rear entry, so when I pulled in, I'd have to talk to anybody. But then that's not doing the will and the assignment. I want to be the hands and the feet. I want to know, because I get involved in the ISDs. I go talk to the girls and the kids. I get involved in talking to the moms. Because, you know, I believe that if I can find a young mom and a young couple, or that's like a couple, who has like 3 and 4 kids, I will keep their kids for them just so that they can have a moment for themselves. Because I believe that's my assignment given, because I think it's community. And so community does play a lot in it. You have to be involved in the community. If I wasn't in the community, I wouldn't have met you.
Yeah.
You know, you and your lovely wife. And I just, you know, just love you guys and how, you know, you just never know what it looks like and what a family could be. It doesn't have to necessarily be somebody that was raised up with you. I think we become family more so than anything. And so I believe that as we continue to be part of a community, we're helping each other reclaim little parts of us. So that means we can't forget our veterans. We can't forget the homeless. We can't forget the abandoned children. We can't forget the things in society that we see someone who doesn't have the things that we have. And yet we don't even know what's going on in a lot of homes. Even if we live in great societies, there's a lot of abandonment in those homes. So being a part of that community, it helps us help other people reclaim themselves and little parts of themselves.
Awesome. Monica, the organizations are called That Girl is Smart.
That Girl is Smart. TGIS is what I call it. TGIS.
TGIS.
And TGIB.
And TGIB. Talk a little bit about that and how people can get a hold of you if they're interested in meeting
Okay,
with
so
you about
we have, and so in this last 8 months, I was hacked. And I lost 37 years worth of work and everything. My websites, I lost, so The Monica Johnson, That Girl is Smart, That Boy is Smart, EPD Magazine, all the websites, all the data that I had created, I lost a lot of that. And so the way you can reach now is only through the social media of that until we get the websites and everything rebuilt. And it's That Girl is Smart. I am That Girl is Smart on Instagram, Twitter, and then also on Facebook is That Girl is Smart. And you'll see the pink and white for the girls, and then you'll see the same thing for the boys, the blue and white, and they're That Boy is Smart. And then on Instagram, Twitter as well, and also Facebook. But also, I believe that if you just Google Monica Johnson, and you see my little smiley face, you'll be able to see that I'm someone who's been in the community. And I have a page called Monica Johnson on Instagram. I'm gonna start my first TikTok. I'm gonna do a TikTok today.
Nice.
You have inspired me to get back into social media because I'd shut down. And so I don't know my new phone number yet, so I can't give that to you. So I hope you go edit this part out.
Yeah, it's okay. I wouldn't give it to
Because I don't know the number. I just got a new number this week.
No problem.
But I really appreciate the work that you do. I really appreciate the life that you're living and how you are being this person of resilience and truth, and you're walking in it, you know, sometimes afraid, but knowing that you're a man of valor in this space and that you don't have to walk in it alone any longer. and you just keep going. So thank you for everybody that you interview, because their stories do matter. Thank you for allowing God to use you to tell the stories.
Yeah.
You're telling real life stories. So you're making real
Can't
life.
make me cry on my
I don't
own
want to.
You can't make me get emotional. Okay.
But you're making.
But go ahead. I'll receive everything you're saying.
You're making real life differences. So never think that anything you go through is only so that the armor is there, but sometimes he want to pierce that shield just a little bit so that you can see the work that you've been created to do. And as you continue to walk in it boldly, you have not seen the things that God is going to do, the people you're going to encounter and meet, because you have that open spirit. You think sometimes you shut yourself off, but it's only a protective mechanism for you. But God is about to open these doors, and you're not going to be able to shut them. And you will be traveling and speaking and talking and doing all those things.
I appreciate it. Really excited. This has been a journey getting in the sphere. I started just recently starting to take conversations that I've had with individuals and see and just 1 minute conversations and break it down to put it in social media.
Wow.
And you'd be surprised when that 1 minute how impactful that one minute, what that conversation was about. Just that 1 minute. And our conversations, whatever minutes there's going to be many of those 1 minutes, and there are many of those minutes with those other individuals too. So I've been blessed. It's brought some awareness to me, and I'm glad that I was hopeful that this would get you in, get that next gear, get out of neutral.
Yeah, because I've been in neutral.
Maybe you're driving in overdrive too, too. But no, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to have you on the podcast. Of course, the Rush family loves you, and
I love you guys.
And we're thankful to have you in our life and the capacity you serve as a friend and as a mentor. And I'm so happy to be able to sit with you today and talk about this stuff. And I'll put some of the links on this podcast for you so people can get a hold of you.
And just remember, when we all have compartmentalized parts of ourselves that are spread. But at some point, we have to come to a space where we say, enough is enough. I'm going to gather this piece and that piece and all this piece and that piece. And then watch my TED Talk called Can We End the Culture of Abandonment? Because I always say that what if, through an encounter with you and helping people gather little small pieces of themselves, that someone can shift from brokenness to breathtaking. And that way you'll know that you're walking by divine purpose, divine assignment, and that you're living on purpose. And you're not just walking this space for nothing. You're being the hands and the feet of God, and you're doing the assignment unafraid, and you're doing it because you know you've been called, you've been chosen, you've been predestined to do it. And you don't because if you have to keep looking back to remind you of where you need to go, just glance at it. You can't go back and study it all day long, because if you study it, then you'll stay in that one space and you never move forward. This is the year where the people who have stopped are now going to pick up that space and move forward, unafraid with the assignments that God has given you. Unafraid. Don't hold back. Don't be afraid, because when Jesus was never afraid, and he only used one name at one time.
Amen.
Amen.
Monica, thank you for coming on the Rush Outrospective, Mastering the Art of Living podcast. Guys, that's it for the podcast. As I always say, have peace and light in you, and remember that the ocean refuses no river.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that. The ocean, just remember, the ocean refuses no river.
Yes.
Ooh.